The Tech Field Day delegates have been attending NetApp Insight this week in Las Vegas, and we have heard a number of product announcements. We heard a lot about AI. We learned about a brand new AI data capability, as well as a brand new storage platform, the AFX from NetApp. And I thought that it would be great to hear from the delegates, just get a bit of a feedback session here, a roundtable discussion on what they thought of the announcements this week. So who wants to kick it off? Start off with the discussion. Glenn.
Yeah, I was very impressed with how NetApp's changed the discussion on where embedding and tokenization happen, that it's now a storage function. I think they've made that change. And how they've updated their storage, the physical storage architecture with the disaggregated shelves and the aggregate virtualization, all that great stuff, to finally be able to deal with a lot of the criticisms they've had in the past, but scale out performance and independently scale compute and storage. So I think they've taken some pretty big strides while still preserving the things that were good in ONTAP and bringing those into future Power Days. That's a big deal, I think.
Yeah, I liked the announcements, and there's a lot here. But what I'm really interested to see is whether they have just kind of really realized what they've stumbled across, because there's a huge amount of potential here, and it'd be really interesting to see where they take it, because they could be leading the way in the way that AI architecture is built. They've got all the components. It's about whether they realize what they've got there and how they execute it.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting where they're going with the AI stuff. I think they're kind of the first in the market to land on some of this stuff. So it'll be interesting to see where they go with it, and the fact that they were able to deal with the cloud and the on-prem world. And from a data person who used to play with storage and haven't in a little bit, it was really interesting for me to see be at a storage event where the cloud wasn't a bad word, and where they're realizing, okay, we need to deal with all this random stuff that's kind of floating all over the place, and have it as one big piece that we can deal with.
Yeah, I agree. I think that I hope that they haven't just stumbled across it. I think there's probably a lot of pushing from the inside to make this really well known that you cannot do AI without data. However, a storage company is not an AI company and never will be. Storage people have always been the guardians of the data, and that's what this is all about. I will say that at some points, I thought that what I was hearing from the stage of the keynotes was almost like people cosplaying being up on a stage and making some of these very grandiose, bombastic comments that they don't need to make. And they don't need to say they are the only ones that do certain things, because they offered no proof that they are the only ones that do certain things, at least not in the keynotes. And I don't think they are the only ones that do certain things as far as storage. Storage is storage. However, I do think that taking that step to say that data is what's important and working with their partners is what's important. And I hope that they can dial in on that message and really deliver it.
It's saying that data is key and important is not, amazingly, not said enough in the world of AI. And it's great to see a major brand saying that while simultaneously saying, we are a storage brand. Storage is what we know and do. They're pretty explicit about that. They're playing their position, playing well and in partnership with others. They've always been really strong there. So I think all of that is really, it's really nice to see, and it's nice to see it play out in the products where they are taking this sort of, horizontal approach. What really impresses me in a broader sense is really, truly, I hate jumping on trends or being part of trends, but AI is clearly far more than that. And it is so pervasive. It is so everywhere. Everyone, including the storage admin, needs to stand up and take part. And some of the discussion, private discussion that we had, was around how that engenders a sort of a cultural change. I know Jason, you talked about that quite a bit. I don't know how that happens. That is far beyond NetApp alone. And that everybody sort of transforming or changing or taking new approaches to what they're doing is really necessary. We see here at NetApp with these announcement tools and capabilities that will help fuel that. But you said it yourself just now, Gina, storage is storage. That is true, but storage today is not necessarily storage of yesterday.
No,
either.
not at all.
Like I was really happy to hear all those uses of the word data, of course. But like what I kept thinking about over these 2 days is they're finally putting data back into data management. So we've had these discussions before about how my world of data management meant nothing the same as storage data management. And that was because, from my point of view, storage just stopped looking at data at the file level pretty much. But now they're going into the files, like classifying the data, tagging the data, sensitivity levels, discovering the data. Like, I think that is now that we're getting, sort of, now data management kind of means the same thing. And of course, all the words that I love, data governance, tagging, metadata, like that says to me that they really, when they mean data, they actually mean the data that AI needs to know. And all the things they're doing are going to be valuable even for non-AI workloads.
Yeah, and I just want to go back to what Guy was saying there. I think it's really interesting to see NetApp kind of refocusing. It's been an interesting kind of, I don't know, not quite a decade, but just under. They went out into lots of different things. They went through a massive set of acquisitions in various areas throughout various parts of cloud and other operations. And there was a time when it looked a little bit like they didn't really know where they were or what their identity was. But now it seems really clear. They've leaned back in and like we are good at storage and we're good at helping people with storage. And we've seen some really clear messages around, okay, well, we've got these tools and they've had some of these acquisitions around data governance and other things. And they're now starting to use them in the right way. So they shut off some of the acquisitions, they've integrated others, and they're kind of now building that back into, rather it being a rather large portfolio of lots of disparate products, it feels like a lot more integrated. Like they've finally found what works, and I think that's going to be really useful.
I definitely agree to that. It feels like one NetApp, and it hadn't in previous events.
Yeah, going to the two previous points that were made, right? So I think we can now start to look at, just in the data context, start to bring a little ITIL into this. Now you've got architecture, you've got engineering, you've got operations. What NetApp has always done, and I don't think it's been recognized, is that, yeah, they got storage, but what they're bringing is a homogenized data operations platform. Not engineering, because that's what we're talking about, that's what Karen's talking about. And architecture as well. I think, those are the upper layers. And and NetApp has never really talked to data architecture folks, and they've never really talked to data engineering folks. But they're all about data operations. And one of the things I do want to take exception with, Gina, is that the thing that NetApp does that no one else does, and this is absolutely fact-based, is they are the only ones who have a homogenized platform that has first-party storage in the clouds in all three of the major hyperscalers. Nobody else has that, and at the current time. And there are a few vendors that do have customer-managed cloud-based versions of their operating systems, but none of them have integrated the way NetApp has with these three clouds and provide this homogenized data operations platform. That's what I'm going to call it. More than it is now. Storage is a means to an end. You're absolutely correct. Storage is storage. It's born, and but data operations is where NetApp is sitting. And what they've now done is taken some of these AI operations that are data focused and said, this is not engineering anymore. Tokenization embedding, that used to be engineering. We think it's more operations. We saw that in regular infrastructure too, things that came out of engineering and started getting into the operational framework, right? So I think it's an interesting way to look at it. And I think it helps put NetApp in perspective as to where they should live and where they should dominate.
Wow, you agreed with something I said. That was amazing. Best place living. I want to get back to something we talked about in one of the presentations, was NetApp's use of the word workload. And I think this is what's happening in the industry, right? I think we've had so much hype around AI and what it should do and what it can do and what it's going to do. And now all of a sudden we're getting to the point where a workload, a method to do this, a pattern of doing AI is starting to emerge. And it's emerging enough that storage people can say, oh, it's a workload. If it's a workload as a storage person, I know how to handle that. I know how to operationalize that. I know how to make sure you've got the storage where you need it, when you need it. I know how to give you the access. Now that I understand other people, we've figured out ways of letting non-storage people like data scientists make their own little data volumes and playgrounds where they can play in. So they've figured all of that out. So now that we have this AI workload, or workflow might be a better way to put it right now, NetApp has put together platforms to support that, which is storage. Storage has always supported a workload. If we know what the workload is and what the outcome's supposed to be, we can architect to it. So they're doing what their heritage, their 30-year heritage says they should do.
Yeah, I will. Let's try to zoom in on that a little bit, Gina, because I think that's a message that they were trying to send, and to the point that we heard from Jason and what you just said as well. This is I think a charge that NetApp is. I don't know if they're consciously making it or just happen to be making it, but essentially, storage people, let's go. Let's elevate what we're doing. Let's become more involved, more part of the work. And I agree with you, Gina, from we go way back in storage. Workload was not a word we used, but I heard it used a lot to refer to a data set, a consistent set of data that served a set of applications, a set of systems, and that it had its own sort of paradigms and needs and performance and capacity and things like that. And all of these things, it's a much more, I think, user-friendly way to describe storage than the archaic terms that we've used for decades. And I think that reflects a lot of the messaging that we're hearing here as well. That it's things that are happening up the stack. But at the same time, I'm worried that some storage companies have gotten, I guess, too out over their skis when it comes to, we're not storage companies anymore. We're data companies, we're AI companies, we're compute, we're cloud. I think NetApp is the only storage company that still understands that it's a storage company, and I think that that's good, because frankly, I don't find a lot of the other messaging compelling. So, let me throw that at you. What do you think about a storage company? We'll go to Guy and then Gina. Yeah,
I think it's worth exploring AI Data Engine, which is one of the big announcements at in a little bit of detail, because I think where these claims and these big statements, another one was. We don't try to produce like a lot of companies do. There's a claim from NetApp. We don't try to produce what a lot of companies do and like an entire solution. We know where we sit, and we use partnerships to fill in the rest. The test for these claims is what the product actually does. We all got a chance to do a little walkthrough of the product, see what its functionality is. And we also got some perspective during these sessions as to how they've designed it. They've designed it for these two personas, the configurer, maintainer, and so forth, the storage or IT admin on the one hand, but then the user on the other hand, the proverbial data scientist. And when you look at the functionality of AI Data Engine, what you're seeing is these sort of fundamental basic components of data curation, data governance, and so forth, to tune or to adjust it to a particular application in use, where you can see what the admin is doing, you can see what the data scientist is allowed to do, and you can see how these capabilities can be really beneficial close to the flash, close to the medium, and that helps you see that they are limiting what is actually a happy hunting ground for them of product development anyway.
I think even limiting it's such a lot to do. I mean,
that's what I meant by happy hunting ground.
Yeah, okay.
They limit it, but it's still this wide range of potential innovation and value.
There's so much to do. And I think when I was describing kind of that workflow for AI that they've been describing, it hasn't come to a head yet. There's not a set of standards that says you do this, then you do this and this. That's all emerging. And I think they put themselves into a very good place. But I think from a storage perspective, there's a lot of background in that. So if a new project is spun up somewhere where you're working and it's going to be, this is how long ago I was storage admin, it's going to be a 3-tier web application, right? That's what I used to do, so don't judge me. I'm going to use this example because
People still build 3-tier web applications, I will tell you, yeah.
They have the same color hair as you, though.
But it's going to have a database. It's going to have a database component. It's going to have storage component. It's going to have server components. And all of those things are going to have to work in harmony. And you have to think about all the other things. You're going to think, will it grow? What do I have to work? What volume am I going to put it on? How much, how busy is it going to be? How much processing speed does it have to have? Where's the data going to go? Who needs to have access to it? How do I back it up? How do I restore it? We're going to have to put this into our whole disaster recovery plan. All of these things. And that was then. So there's now a whole lot of evolution of the field, as Becky could hardly go into details, all sorts of details on. But the whole deal is we had to understand the application. We had to understand not only the applications being created, we had to understand all the other underlying components to it. So that's kind of how I take this whole idea of workload. You have to understand for the end application. A lot of what I was supporting then was medical trials and websites to support medical trials. Lots of medical compliance stuff around it, everything. All of that stuff that a storage admin has to know so that we understand that data is always available when it's supposed to be available. And I think that's kind of where NetApp's going back to with AI. We've still got this happy hunting grounds of we don't really know what that workload is going to look like, but they've kind of said, we know this is the storage part of it, and we know that our ONTAP can do all of these things to make these things we're hearing data scientists tell us are going to be part of that workflow relative and available, and we can build things to make it easier for them. So that's kind of where I got out of this.
Yeah, it's like a sense of humility almost. Like we know who we are, we know what we know, and we know what we don't know, and we want to work with those people. We want to work with you. Yeah.
So I understand why they've branded this AIDE, right? But I also keep thinking about all the steps, nearly every step they talked about, even the things you talked about just now, Gina, they're also needed for analytics. They're also needed for reporting and data visualizations and all of that stuff. So it makes me wonder if that branding is going to over limit people's paying attention to it, because it is really it's the sum of all the parts that they've focused on AI, but we have a lot of the same things that we need to do for analytics. I think one of the reasons is that we learned all those lessons when we went to data warehouses, so the beginning of analytics. And now we're bringing in AI. It's a different group of people, and they're starting to realize if you're going from the source data to something else, there's all these extra steps you need to do. You have to find your data, you have to figure out what it means, you need to store what you found out about it. So I think I'm really happy that they're doing this, but they're also, it's very lean products, and they admitted to that. It's scoped to, supporting their particular services. It's doing the minimum of what they need to do for inventory and classification and guardrails and all of that stuff. And certainly they're going to, add to that, expand the scope. But I do think there's a lot of competition they have from other providers, like even the hypervisors that have products that do that right now in their cloud services. So I wonder how that's all going to balance out.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point as well. And I think I like that they've started small. Because I've been around long enough that going through the 7 mode to C transition where they went all out was painful for a very long time for many customers. And it's good to see that they haven't done that again, and that they've started small and they've said, right, this is what we can do now. But as we were talking to them and as we introduced things to them, you could see them going, oh, actually, no, okay, there's good input there. There's more ways that we could use this. There's other use cases that we haven't necessarily thought about. And I think that sort of analytics, BI, those sorts of things are going to be the ones that change the most when it comes to storage admins and data at the moment, even with the way that AI is changing, I think those things are the ripe candidates for the first kind of major changes. And that's some of the stuff I think is really going to be interesting. And it actually ties into a couple of the customers I'm working with at the moment, where we have been working and looking at how we store all of the different types of data across the systems, because we might want to use some of it at some point. We don't know exactly how, but it's like, get it all there and then just start learning the intelligence of that data, and then we can work out what we want to do with it later. But as long as we've got it and we know we can sort of curate it a little bit, then we can deal with it later. And I think these sorts of systems will help with that.
And last year they talked about these same topics, and they really didn't have a lot to show for it. And it's really interesting to see like what progress that they've made in the past year. And even going through like the CAN demo for AIDE, it looks very accessible. Like it doesn't look like you have to be like the top of your industry to be able to run this. That's very impressive.
Yeah, so I was just thinking back to what we were talking about a couple of sessions ago with how it was going to gather all the data up, and it'll gather all the metadata for all the data in your estate. And I was thinking about some of the stuff Karen was talking about with how they're going to be doing some of this. And I was thinking back to a field day I was at 3 or 4 years ago when one of the companies was talking about the fact that they were building a platform to do just that, to suck up all the data in the enterprise and gather all the metadata. And they were talking about it would take days to crawl the entire enterprise and look for changes. And today they were talking about the fact that we're going to be able to do that in minutes or hours, as opposed to what I saw just a couple of years ago, and they were talking about having a fleet of servers to do all this crawling. And now we're doing it just in a couple of quick little appliances that sit there and just get a snap of the data. And the fact that we can do it all generated at the storage layer without having to push it all out to an app server somewhere is a great thing, I think.
I do wonder though about data gravity. They talked about it, talked about sidestepping it. I don't really know how Snap works. I don't know if it works in a Snap. There's a little bit of gravity towards the new hardware.
I think it's definitely pushing you towards the new hardware to get a lot of that.
Yeah, and I think that is a critical issue to focus on. Is you want to right now you want to get the workload to the data rather than the other way around. And with all this flexibility and everything else, architectural decisions that create friction, time, whatever, they appear like a risk to me.
Yeah. There's some really key points about that. I think where NetApp have leveraged really well, it goes into what you were saying about minutes and hours, is their snapshot technology and their SnapDiff engine, which never really gets talked about much, or at least enough, is really incredibly efficient, and it's been used for backups and other bits and pieces for a long time. But the way that works and all the work they've put into that over the 30 years is a really incredible way to then fuel this. Because you get down to the absolute block level changes, and you can scan through petabytes, exabytes of data in seconds and say, well, it was only these half dozen blocks that changed, because they keep all of that. And so while there is that little bit of gravity if I want to bring these things in, it's not necessarily that I want to bring the data there. I want to bring the data about the data. So it's the Snap mirror brings you the metadata. It brings you all the inode tables. It brings you all the differences. Yeah. So you're Snap mirroring it to get the differencing, not necessarily for all of the data all the time. You're getting it to get all the metadata and all the changes. And those Snap mirrors could just be kind of binned off again after a very short period of time, because you're pulling all the metadata in via the Snap mirror to get it into the engine.
Well, yes, when we're using NFS or CIFS, but the S3 engine is a little bit different with SnapMirror today. It is based on object by object today. It has to be.
Yes.
It's just it's the way they implemented it on ONTAP. So I think there could be some challenges there, but no more of a challenge than would be with any other tool, right? So I'm not too concerned about that. But to the point of a lot of the vendors, a lot of CEOs have taken credit for, I'm going to bring AI to the data, not data to the AI. I've heard 3 of them already. And so challenge with that is that, I might want to bring AI to the data. If I've got one of these AFX clusters sitting a data center somewhere. I mean, that's a great thing, right? Problem is you may not be able to have GPUs right next to that thing to do the other stuff, right? And so you may not be able to bring AI to that data, or the nature of the tasks that you're doing may require a lower latency than even the 2 or 3 milliseconds it would take to get to the cloud region that's adjacent to that data, right? It may not be appropriate. So sometimes you're just going to have to move it out there. And I think there's going to be more of that people think.
That's my essential point.
Yeah, I think it's not going to be
a hidden risk there that you may not.
Yeah, you just don't know. Now, I mean, it could be perfectly fine. I mean, there'll be certain things, and also not everything requires GPUs. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
But I just think that there's so many permutations. I think that this is going to be the core. This is going to be the core tenet of a company's AI data hub, right? And then from that, they've got all the choices in these clouds, especially now that you got SnapMirror with Azure, SnapMirror with Google. You got the ability to move this data all these different ways down to your edge. So you'll be able to have this core, have your, and do your data pipeline stuff in that sense, and then push it out to where you need to go at, whether it's a neo cloud or it's a cloud, whether it's an edge or some other place where you do have GPUs. I think there's going to be more data motion than not, but NetApp is the one who they own that space. I mean, they're the ones who have been always better at that space to do it consistently. The S3 thing, maybe jury's out, we'll see. But I think they put themselves in a great spot. And I think enterprises are going to need this for their architecture going forward, because they have no idea where they're going.
I came into this, we knew ahead of time it's going to be very AI focused and everything. But I was hoping to hear more references to things like AI specific security needs, AI threat mitigation needs, not so much that I expected them to deliver products or services that do it, but I think all people delivering AI infrastructure presentations should be talking about, how does this work with threat mitigation? How does this work? What sort of granularity of security is? And I think part of it was they're coming into it saying, hey, we've got the whole access to data thing. We've been doing it for decades, so we got that part. But I'd want them to talk about even things like AI ethics and bias and all those things. Like, how are they going to support those tools or those actions? And I want to hear more vendors talking about that.
It's a really interesting point that you make, and I think that's a corollary to what we were talking about earlier in this discussion. That if you have this sense of sort of the sense of self and of boundary and partnership and so on. The flip side of that is that sometimes you don't hear the messaging that people expect you to hear. I mean, I actually felt relieved that I didn't hear a bunch of hand waving about the future of AI. Oh, yeah. I heard a lot of nuts and bolts about supporting the future of AI with partners, which I actually really enjoyed myself. But I see what you're saying too, that maybe we need a little bit more specificity on how we're going to do some of these things. Yeah,
I think we may have got the nuts and bolts of how the systems work, but I agree with you. But I also just agree about the basics. Like, I would have loved to have heard about a customer who, here's where the customer was going with what they were trying to build with AI. Here's the challenges they had of having to get the data in. So then we had them try out this new thing that we created and we were going to launch. And here's how they connected their old filers. Because you heard all the questions I asked about, but where's the data? What happens when you have somebody that doesn't know storage create their own volume? Where does that actually create it? How many copies is that making? How are you keeping track of all that? Like, let's talk about, because from a storage perspective, that stuff all matters. That's part of understanding how big it's going to be. They didn't talk anything about kind of what's in the pipeline. Here's a customer that went through all of that with NetApp. I would have loved to have heard that.
Yeah, I think to answer a couple of these questions that just come up is that I think there was a little bit of an assumption around the baseline of knowledge because of them being at Insight. And so they have DataOps Toolkit, right, which plugs into Jupyter Labs, Jupyter Notebooks, and it handles all those things for you. And there's the same with what you were saying about the data gravity and moving things around. There's already parts of the toolkit that would, and I think this is where the AIDE stuff will come in really handy, is that yeah, I may still need to move some of that data around, but they've got the most efficient way of identifying and moving just the data I need.
Mhm.
And so that's something that NetApp's got that they can play on really, really well.
They had a tool a long time ago that they were kind of teasing a long time ago, and then it just got killed. And so I'm glad to see them get to market with this.
Yeah, exactly. And then, so on your part, I don't think I would necessarily like them to see them have spoken too much about the ethics and some of the other things. But what they probably could have talked about a little bit more, and I made some assumptions because they didn't cover it, but I made some assumptions around how the policy engine works, and I'm assuming it's based on F policy. So they've got this entire framework and API that partners already integrate into. So you could just have new integrations into F policy and AIDE that could handle that bias and governance and other things. And they probably could have done a little bit better job talking about that, what the ecosystem is, because they were very good at saying, this is where we fit right now. And I think, there could have been a bit more of this is where the other players fit and how we build it.
And how we should integrate with them. That's what I wanted to hear.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, just as they were providing this new AFX thing provides an aggregate, a virtualization layer, abstraction layer above the aggregates. What they are providing here is the abstraction layer above those primitive tools to make another layer of tools that are more consumable, but are still building blocks to be used by others to build other things, right? So layers upon layers.
Turtles all the way down. Does anyone want to have a last word, or should we wrap?
Yeah, well,
Okay.
So the demo you're saying they should have done, where this is where they were going, and then we plugged our thing in, and it was great. I love that idea. I would love to see a demo like that, or just talk about that at a keynote. It doesn't need to be long, 2 minutes. But I think that would be super compelling and really would highlight and show off the bells and whistles of the new platform, and I now want them to do it.
I will just point out that the platform was literally released today.
Yeah, but it was,
and so
it was in preview. They had people on it.
So how about this? Why don't we say this next year? NetApp Insight. That's what we want to hear, because I agree with you. I think that would be very, very powerful to set, because as we heard again and again and again, and as we've heard at literally every conference related to AI this year, that MIT study and the internal study here and so on, that companies are trying to do AI and they're failing.
Yeah, and I with this, and we can make it better.
Exactly. And a vendor who can come in and say, companies, we're trying to do AI and are failing, and they plugged our thing in and it worked. That's the story I think that all of us want to hear, because I think all of us are hungry to hear it worked. Yep. And unfortunately, we've heard a lot of it didn't. So that's the challenge, I guess, for next year. So thank you for being part of this. Thank you all for giving your time and your thoughts to during the Tech Field Day presentations, as well as during this roundtable discussion.